All right, hey, what's up guys? Gratuitous here. In this video, I want to talk to you about a mastering chain. A mastering chain is essentially just the order of your plugins on the master track. So when we mix our music, it's all on the individual tracks. Those all get routed to the master bus, our 2 bus, okay? It has a left and a right channel. On this master insert, or master bus, this is where we are applying our effects and the order we put our plugins. Now, a mastering chain can get complex. You can have tons of different plugins like a compressor, an EQ, a clipper, saturation, limiter, right? It doesn't have to be that intense. You can keep it really, really simple, and that is what I suggest when you first start up. However, when you are getting into a mastering chain, there are some golden rules that you should be following to comply with the loudness standards, and that is having a loudness meter as your absolute very last plugin for you to monitor what is going on inside your audio. And then right before that, so it's your second last plugin, you want to have a limiter, and you put the ceiling or threshold or output to -1. Okay, so let's hop into FL Studio and I'll talk to you more about a mastering chain and how the order that your plugins are in, how they work. All right, so here we are in FL Studio, and before we get into the tutorial, you guys can check out my free book I've written for you guys for FL Studio producers. Just go to itsgratuitous.com/5 keys. You can download my free beat making book. Tons and tons of valuable tips in there, okay? All right, so I want to talk to you about your mixer chain. So we're going to talk a little bit about how the mixer works, talk about the inserts and how they all are routed to the master. So again, you go to insert 8, follow the cable, right? Goes to the master. Insert 9, it goes to the master. For example, if we go to 9 here, you can see it's actually being routed to some sends. Another word for a send is like a parallel track. You can see that 9 is going to some wideness, to some distortion, and some parallel compression. But at the same time, watch, if I click on 4, it's going to the master. Number 5, it's going to the master. Number 6. So everything gets routed to the master, and this is where we are doing mastering. Now, this is where your mastering chain comes into play, okay? So when you have a mastering chain, it's just the order that your plugins are in. So for example, if we put the single band compressor first, and then the multi-band compressor, and then EQ, there's no right or wrong way, all right? But you just need to be aware that the order that you are putting your plugins does affect the next plugin, okay? So for example, if we do something on the multi-band compressor and then it goes into the single band compressor, this is what's called in series. So as the audio goes through each plugin, it gets processed more and more and more, eventually to your limiter and then your loudness meter, okay? So if you guys are on a budget, my suggestion to you guys is to use the Yulin loudness meter. He does have a free and a paid version, and you can have I like to sometimes use it like this, and you can just kind of look at like the numbers, and it's not so big on the screen. So the order your plugins are in does matter, and the same thing even on your individual mixer insert. So for example, you can see here I have an EQ and then a compressor. If I were to put the compressor first and then the EQ, we are going to get a little bit of a different sound depending on how we've processed it, okay? And I'll just show you just an example here quickly. So we have this melody, and what I'll do is I'll just send it to a mixer insert. I'm going to do that with Control and L. All right, and let's just open up an EQ, which is also a frequency analyzer, frequency spectrum analyzer. And so let's just open up 2 of them. All right, and those we can kind of monitor like before and after. All right, so like that, and I'll just go before EQ, and I'll go after EQ. All right, and we can see the titles up here, and this is just going to show you that before and after of what we're doing. So if we put some distortion on here, just some, and again, this is in series, so it's going to be more aggressive than if it's in parallel. And I like the Fruity Blood overdrive. And so, for example, if it's in parallel, for example, if I route this to some parallel distortion, you know, this is in parallel, which means that we can kind of blend in the effect we want. Whereas when it's in series, such as adding the effect directly onto the mixer insert, just like you're seeing here, it's going to be a lot more aggressive depending on the settings. But what's happening is this distortion, if we put it right at the beginning, now the EQ and the after EQ both get this distortion. If we put the distortion after the before EQ, only the after EQ is getting the distortion. If we put it after all of them, well then after all the EQs, then the distortion is hitting the audio, okay? But what happens on the parallel track is essentially after slot 10, it leaves this cable and we can just say, hey, we want to send it to some parallel distortion. And so if we were to add on like, let's say chorus and, however many other plugins you want, let's just say like some wideness, what's happening is all of these effects are in series. So as the audio goes through each insert, right? Again, let's just put a little space in there. Sometimes it's a little easier to see. So as the audio goes into the before EQ, and then it goes into the after EQ, so it's getting processed more and more. For example, let's say on the before EQ, let's say we cut out some of those highs. Now the after EQ, watch, if we look at that, let's just turn these off and I'll just show you that first. So for example, here's the before EQ. We can see it like this, right? Now you can see the after EQ. Okay, so let's come here to the Pro Q3 and you can have the before and after. So let's turn off the after. So this is it before, right? This is what our frequency spectrum is before. I have filtered out the highs, and this is what it leaves us. So this is telling us that the order of our plugins matters. And if I were to put the after EQ first, you can see that now we get our full frequency spectrum back because it's seeing the audio before it's filtered. Okay? And so when we're talking about a mastering chain, just the order of your plugins matters. It doesn't matter in a sense of like right or wrong. However, what is right and wrong in the mastering chain is you want to have your limiter as the very, very last plugin, and then you want to have your loudness meter. Okay, that's what I was trying to get across. Now, again, for me personally, I would just prefer just to use the one limiter. It has a built-in loudness meter. And what's really, really powerful about the Pro-L 2 is to really conform to the loudness standards is it has a true peak meter. And so this is been more popular in recent years, and we're talking about intersample peaks. And so what that means is when you are sampling your music at like 44.1, if you push your music too loud, in between those points, your audio interface or your phone, when it is playing back that file from digital to analog conversion, that's where this distortion can come in. Just because you put it to -1 doesn't mean that the audio still can't slip over -1. And depending on how loud you've pushed your music, so for example, let's just turn this on. I'll turn off, let's just play the beat and I will turn off those effects. So, all right, so you can see here that I have a true peak limiter on, and this ensures that it is -1. So you can see that if I went -1 on my out and I have my true peak meter on, okay, so for example, you can see up here in the top left, you can see the true peak metering. And so if I have that enabled, you will see that I actually go louder than -1. So let's just go a little further into the chorus. So you can see I'm a -0.8, but again, to follow the loudness standards, it needs to be -1. And so the really awesome thing with Pro-L 2 is you can just select this and it will do it for you. All right, it will not allow it to go over -1. And so like that's a built-in thing. You know, this track's probably pushed a little hard, and you can see it's not mixed, just a couple of things I've mixed. I added this one in here with you and I turned off the effects. But I do like the sound of it, you know, it's pretty balanced for how loud it is. And again, so I have the true peak limiting on, which allows us to conform to the loudness standards of -1. If I disable that, you can see that it is going over, which means that we're not technically complying with the loudness standards. And this is just to show you that if you push your music too loud, it can actually go over -1 because this is what's called the intersample peaks. And this has been a really, really big discussion nowadays with loudness. But this is why I really like the FabFilter Pro-L 2. You just simply enable the true peak limiting. It allows you to for sure get that -1. Okay, so again, if you guys want to learn FL Studio and how to make beats with me, you guys can visit my website at itsgratuitous.com/courses. Tons and tons of courses teaching you guys all just different tricks and tips about FL Studio and how to make beats. If you want more information, just visit the link and check out my free book. It's called 5 Keys to a Successful Beat. So simple, it becomes creative. I include my 5 keys as well as my 7 core principles about becoming a music producer and, how to actually see results when you are making your beats and you're learning all this stuff. I understand 100%. It's very overwhelming. It doesn't have to be, all right? It doesn't have to be too complex. Keep things simple. Like I said, for your mastering chain, the order of your plugins matters, but the biggest thing is you want to have a loudness meter. You want to have a limiter. Again, -1 is that standard, but again, you also want to comply with the true peak, with your true peak max. All right. And then, but like I said, if you just use like the Pro L2, you just enable this and it does comply. As you can see, it says dBTP, which is true peak. All right. So this ensures that you are complying with that -1 loudness standard. And even some streaming platforms have like a -2 for like its loudness standard. So the whole loudness stuff, it's going in the right direction. It's awesome from where it's come from, but it's still kind of being fine-tuned a little bit. But right now it's at a pretty good spot. So I hope that information helps, and I'll talk to you guys in another video. Definitely leave your comments below if you would like to see more videos on certain topics.